While my fiancée was in the shower, her phone lit up. "See you tonight. Same room as last time." I forwarded it to her parents. I had never been the kind of guy who snooped through phones. Honestly, I thought people who did that were already in relationships they didn't trust. And if you need to check, maybe you shouldn't even be there. But trust isn't always a solid wall. It's more like glass. You believe it's sturdy, until one small crack makes you realize how fragile it really is. My crack appeared one ordinary evening, in the form of a single text message glowing across her screen while she was in the shower. It was late, around 9 p.m., when it happened. We had eaten together, nothing special, just pasta we threw together because she said she had a study session later. I remember she had been strangely cheerful at dinner, a little too talkative, almost rehearsed, like someone acting normal after hiding something. But I didn't dwell on it. People get moody sometimes. After dinner, she showered while I scrolled on my laptop, checking work emails. That's when her phone lit up on the nightstand. The glow caught my eye, not because I wanted to look, but because the screen was angled toward me. A short preview banner stretched across the lock screen. Just one line. It said, "See you tonight. Same room as last time." My body stiffened. At first, I thought maybe I misread it, maybe it was spam. But the words were too deliberate, too personal. Same room. Last time. It didn't sound like group chat banter. It sounded like logistics between people meeting in secret. I didn't pick the phone up. I didn't need to. That line alone was enough to slice straight through my stomach like glass shards. My hands trembled, not from rage, but from the weight of realization pressing down all at once. People talk about finding out their partner cheated like a slow puzzle, piecing together little hints over time. For me, it felt like a hammer smashing the whole thing open in one blow. I sat there, listening to the water running in the shower, steam drifting under the door, while the glow of her phone dimmed and vanished. My fiancée, my supposed future wife, was planning to meet someone that very night. Not tomorrow, not maybe, not suspicion. Tonight. Most people would have confronted her right there, stormed into the bathroom, demanded answers. My instincts went the opposite direction. Rage is noisy, but clarity is quiet. Something in me told me not to say a word, not yet. If she had been lying, then her lies were probably bigger than one message, and if I exploded now, she'd bury everything before I could reach it. Instead, I unlocked my own phone, snapped a quick photo of her screen from where I sat, then did something even colder. I forwarded the message to her parents. Both of them, her father and her mother. It wasn't a petty move, it was strategy. They were the ones who had vouched for her character, the ones who always praised how loyal and pure she was. If she was leading a double life, they deserved to see the cracks, and I needed allies who wouldn't dismiss me as paranoid. By the time she came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, humming like she didn't have the weight of a double life on her shoulders, I had already slipped my phone back into my pocket. I smiled at her, even joked about the bathroom mirror fogging up like a sauna. She laughed, kissed me lightly, and went to dry her hair. No idea that her little world had already been nudged into free fall. That evening, she told me she needed to head out for her study session. She packed her notes in a bag, gave me a quick hug, and promised she wouldn't be late. I let her go. I didn't press. But when the door shut, I felt the quiet in the apartment take on a new shape. Thick, watchful, as if the walls themselves knew. I sat in that silence, waiting, thinking. My mind wasn't just on her, it was on her parents. They hadn't replied to my forward yet, and I wondered what they thought when they saw it. Shock? Denial? Or maybe suspicion had already crossed their minds before, and I had only confirmed it. 2 hours later, the first reply came through. It was her mother. "Are you sure this is from tonight?" No greeting. No kindness. Just straight to disbelief. I sent back a photo of the timestamp on the message. Her mother didn't reply again. The next morning, I noticed something small but important. Her parents invited her over for coffee. Normally, they'd invite both of us, but this time the text said only her name. That was unusual. She told me over breakfast, casually, that her parents wanted to catch up, and she seemed confused about why it wasn't a joint invite. She brushed it off, though, and went. When she returned later that day, I caught a faint change in her expression. Something uneasy behind her smile, like she had been under questioning. She didn't say much, but I could tell the coffee meeting had not been lighthearted. Her parents had asked her something, pressed her about something, and she was trying to keep it contained. I didn't ask. The less I revealed, the better. The rest of that week turned into a quiet theater of observation. I started noticing things I hadn't before. A hotel receipt, half crumpled in her purse, with the logo of a chain only 2 towns over. I noticed her texting late at night, then turning her phone face down when I walked into the room. I noticed how her study sessions lined up too neatly with nights she returned flushed and restless, as if adrenaline hadn't left her system yet. Her parents must have noticed, too, because their tone toward her grew sharper. On Sunday, when we had lunch with them, her father asked her pointed questions about her plans, her schedule, her friends. She gave vague answers, smiling too much, pretending not to notice the scrutiny. I sat there silently, chewing, acting neutral, but beneath the table my fists were clenched. It was during that lunch that her father's eyes flicked toward me, holding for a moment longer than usual. It wasn't just a look, it was an unspoken message. We know now. We believe you. And that was when I realized the scale of what I'd done. By forwarding that one message, I hadn't just exposed her. I had detonated a slow-burn explosion in her entire family dynamic. By the time the week ended, tension hung over everything. She was distracted at home, jumpy with her phone, irritated when I asked simple questions. Her parents kept inviting her over, sometimes without me, sometimes insisting I come too, but always with that same undercurrent of suspicion. And through it all, she never realized where it had started. The night that sealed part one of this unraveling came on Friday. She told me she had another study session. I nodded, kissed her goodbye, and watched her leave. Minutes later, I got a message, not from her, but from her father. It said only 3 words. "We'll follow tonight." The tempo of the game had shifted. Now it wasn't just me watching her secrets unfold, it was her parents too. And none of us were planning to warn her. When her father sent me those 3 words, "We'll follow tonight," I felt a strange calm wash over me. Betrayal stings, but sharing that weight changes it. I was no longer the only one quietly carrying her double life. Now her own blood had stepped into the shadows beside me. She still thought she was moving through the world unnoticed, but in reality, 4 eyes were watching her instead of 2. That Friday evening, she dressed more carefully than usual. She said she was meeting classmates to finalize a project, yet the clothes she picked didn't match late-night studying. She wore perfume she usually saved for dinners, and she styled her hair with deliberate effort. It was the kind of preparation meant for impression, not for cramming notes. I kissed her goodbye at the door, holding the moment longer than she expected. She looked back at me quickly, almost nervous, and then left. Minutes later, I got another text from her father. He was outside. I slipped out quietly, locking the apartment behind me, and met him near the corner where his car idled with the lights off. Inside, I saw his jaw tight, his hands white on the steering wheel. Her mother sat in the passenger seat, silent, staring straight ahead. They didn't need to explain anything. We were all there for the same reason: truth, no matter how ugly. We tailed her car carefully. She drove with music playing, her head bobbing slightly, as though this were a normal carefree evening. But when she pulled off the main road and toward the highway exit that led out of town, no one in that car mistook it for anything innocent. Study groups didn't convene at chain hotels off the interstate. She parked outside a mid-tier hotel, one I had glimpsed earlier in the week on the receipt buried in her purse. She checked her mirror before stepping out, as if worried about being seen, then hurried through the glass doors. The 3 of us sat there in silence, watching. 10 minutes later, another car pulled in. A man climbed out. He wore business casual clothes, confident, relaxed, and walked straight inside like he had done this many times before. My stomach turned. I hadn't expected relief, but in a twisted way, seeing it confirmed felt cleaner than imagining possibilities. There was no room left for doubt. Her father's hand slammed the steering wheel once, hard enough to rattle the dashboard. Her mother whispered something I couldn't hear, but it sounded like a prayer more than words. I just sat still, my eyes fixed on the hotel entrance, waiting for my pulse to slow. We didn't storm inside. That would have been too easy, too loud, too dramatic. Instead, we waited. Hours dragged by. Around midnight, the doors slid open again. She walked out first, her hair slightly disheveled, adjusting her jacket as she glanced around nervously. The man followed a few steps later, their movements calculated to avoid suspicion, but the small gestures betrayed them. She looked back once at him, and the faint smirk exchanged between them said everything. Her father's breathing grew heavy, but I put a hand on his arm. "Not now," I whispered. He hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. We followed them until she returned to the apartment. She crept inside like nothing had happened, slipping off her shoes quietly, probably believing I was already asleep. But I was wide awake, sitting in the living room with a book on my lap, pretending to yawn when she entered. She smiled faintly, mumbled something about group projects running late, and disappeared into the bedroom. The next morning, her parents called her over again. I didn't go with her, but when she returned hours later, her face was pale, her eyes rimmed red. She tried to act casual, but her mood betrayed that something heavy had been said behind closed doors. She didn't mention it, though, and I didn't ask. From that day on, the atmosphere in our lives thickened like storm clouds. Every little detail began to matter. I found lipstick-stained receipts in her bag from bars she claimed she never visited. I saw Uber logs on her phone for rides to neighborhoods where no classmates lived. Once, when she set her bag down in the hall, a hotel keycard slipped halfway out of a side pocket before she quickly shoved it back in. She started snapping at me over trivial things. If I asked when she'd be home, she bristled. If I wondered why she ignored calls during study time, she accused me of being controlling. Her guilt made her defensive, and her defensiveness only fueled suspicion. Her parents' patience cracked first. At Sunday dinner, her father cornered her with blunt questions. Why was she gone so often? Why had she lied about study groups when none of her classmates mentioned them? Her mother demanded to know about the hotel charges on her credit card statement, which she hadn't realized they had seen. The room erupted. She denied, then deflected, then tried to laugh it off as paranoia. She even accused me of planting doubt in their heads, claiming I was insecure. But her arguments wavered under their weight, her voice trembling as contradictions slipped out. Finally, she stood up, shouted that none of us trusted her, and stormed out of the house. That night she came home late, slamming doors, pacing the apartment. I didn't confront her. I let her circle like a caged animal, muttering half-formed excuses under her breath, before collapsing into bed fully clothed. In the silence that followed, I thought carefully. It wasn't enough to simply know the truth. We needed undeniable proof, the kind that shattered every lie at once. If she could still deny, she would. If she could still twist her story, she would. People like that never confess cleanly. They only double down until they're cornered. So I built a plan. The next few days, I collected everything quietly. Screenshots of her ride logs, the crumpled receipts, even the faint smell of his cologne that clung to her scarf one night when she carelessly tossed it over the couch. Each piece was small, but together they formed a mosaic of deceit. The turning point came when I visited the hotel myself. I walked into the lobby, approached the desk, and asked if Alora had checked in recently. The clerk, tired and disinterested, didn't even look twice. He confirmed a reservation under her name, paid with her card, checked in multiple times that month. It was the missing cornerstone. With that, denial would be impossible. The following Friday, her father called me privately. He said he couldn't watch this charade stretch further. He suggested we set a trap, not just for her, but for the man she was meeting. I agreed. That night, I watched from my car as she slipped into the hotel again. Minutes later, the man arrived, carrying a bag. Her parents were parked nearby, their expressions grim. Instead of following them in, I approached the clerk again, this time asking for a duplicate print of her stay history. With just a polite smile and a fabricated excuse, I walked away holding undeniable evidence: room numbers, dates, payments. When I slid the pages across the dashboard to her father, his hands shook as he read. Her mother covered her mouth with both hands, tears spilling down. I felt hollow rather than triumphant. Proof doesn't heal, it only hardens the wound. We didn't confront them that night. We let them continue, oblivious, while we prepared. The stage needed to be set right, in the open, where no lies could shield her. And so the plan was born: an engagement dinner, both families invited, friends present, all expecting a celebration. Instead, it would be her reckoning. The week leading up to it was unbearable. She grew restless, sensing something shifting but unable to pinpoint what. Her calls with friends grew more frequent, her absences longer. She smiled less at home, flinched more when her phone buzzed. It was as though she felt the walls closing in but refused to admit they existed. By the night before the dinner, I caught her pacing the apartment with her phone pressed tight to her ear, whispering. She ended the call abruptly when she noticed me watching. For the first time, I saw fear flash in her eyes, not of me, but of the possibility that her carefully balanced lies were starting to collapse. And she was right. The net had tightened. There would be no escape this time. The night of the engagement dinner was supposed to be a celebration. That was the image we let her believe. We reserved the private dining hall at one of the city's finer restaurants, the kind of place with dim chandeliers, polished silver, and staff who moved with rehearsed elegance. Guests were invited: close friends, extended family, co-workers. On paper, it was to mark the beginning of a life together. In truth, it was the stage for something else entirely. When she walked in with me, her arm looped through mine, she glowed. She smiled wide, embraced relatives, laughed at jokes. To anyone watching, she was the perfect fiancée, the happy bride-to-be. But I could see the nervous flick of her eyes toward her parents, the stiffness in her posture when she noticed their cold politeness. She sensed tension but dismissed it, convincing herself it was nothing she couldn't handle. What she didn't know was that nearly everyone in that room had already been given reason to doubt her. I had sent subtle hints to key people: her cousins, her aunt, even a friend of hers who I knew was fiercely protective. I hadn't told them everything, only that something would be revealed tonight and that they should be present. That vague warning was enough to plant seeds of suspicion, enough to make them watch her closely. The dinner began normally. Toasts were made, glasses clinked, laughter filled the air. Plates of roasted meat and vegetables were passed around, wine flowed. She performed her role flawlessly, chatting with her friend about wedding dress fittings, telling her aunt about floral arrangements. But underneath the surface, I felt like I was watching a play where the lead actress didn't realize the script had changed. Her parents were the first to shift the tone. Halfway through the meal, her father cleared his throat and raised his glass. The room hushed. Everyone expected a warm toast. Instead, his voice carried weight. "I want to thank everyone for coming," he began, steady but cold. "Tonight, we are not just celebrating. Tonight, we are confronting truth." The room stiffened. She froze mid-bite, her fork hovering above her plate. Her eyes darted to me, then to her mother, searching for context. But no one offered her a lifeline. Her father continued. "There are moments in life when lies collapse under their own weight. And unfortunately, that collapse begins tonight." Gasps scattered around the table. A cousin whispered something audibly, and her aunt shook her head in disbelief. My fiancée's face drained of color. She stood abruptly, forcing a laugh. "What are you talking about? This is ridiculous." That's when I reached into my jacket and pulled out a slim folder. I placed it on the table, sliding it toward the center so all could see. Inside were the hotel receipts, the Uber logs, screenshots of messages, even the printout of her check-ins. I had arranged them neatly, undeniable in their detail. Her hand shot out, trying to grab it, but her father was faster. He spread the papers across the table, his voice rising. "Explain these. Explain the rooms, the dates, the charges on your own card." The room erupted into whispers. Friends leaned forward, eyes wide. Her cousins looked at each other with mouths hanging open. She stammered, words spilling out in broken fragments. This isn't what it looks like. Someone's framing me." But before she could finish, the dining hall doors swung open. Standing there was a woman none of us had invited. Angela, the girlfriend of the man she had been meeting. I had tracked her down earlier that week, sent her copies of the same evidence, and told her where to be. Angela walked straight to the table, her heels echoing like gavel strikes. She threw a crumpled piece of paper onto the pile of evidence. It was one of the same messages my fiancé had sent, but to Angela's boyfriend. Identical wording. "See you tonight. Same room as last time." "She's been sleeping with him," Angela said, her voice loud enough for the entire room to hear. "For months, while pretending to plan a wedding." The room gasped again. This time, there was no laughter, no disbelief. Only shock. My fiancée's face twisted. She tried to switch tactics, claiming she was being blackmailed, that she was a victim. She spun stories about harassment, insisting this was a setup designed to ruin her. But every time she spoke, another contradiction unraveled. Her timelines clashed with the receipts. Her excuses crumbled under the weight of Angela's testimony. Her mother, usually quiet, finally spoke. "Enough. We raised you better than this. Look at what you've done, not just to him." She pointed at me, her voice shaking, "but to us. To your family. To everyone here who believed in you." My fiancée broke then. She screamed, tears streaking her face, accusing everyone of betrayal. She shouted that no one understood her, that she deserved happiness, that I wasn't enough. The mask of the perfect bride shattered in an instant, replaced by raw desperation. Guests began leaving, disgusted. Her friend muttered under her breath about always knowing something was off. Her aunt shook her head, whispering that she pitied me. The room that had been filled with laughter an hour earlier now buzzed with judgment and anger. In the chaos, Angela turned to me. "You're lucky," she said, her tone almost sympathetic. "At least you found out before you signed anything." Then she left, slamming the doors behind her. The man himself never showed up that night. Whether he had sensed the trap or simply abandoned her in the storm, I never learned. But his absence only made her look more foolish, more exposed. Eventually, she fled. She grabbed her purse, shoved past her mother, and bolted out of the restaurant into the night. The last thing we saw was her silhouette against the streetlight, small and panicked, before disappearing around the corner. Silence fell in the room. Plates of untouched food sat cold, wine glasses half full. Her parents sat with their heads in their hands, devastated. My chest felt heavy, not with sorrow, but with the surreal clarity of finality. It was over. The engagement, the lies, the illusion. It had all unraveled under the weight of truth. The dinner ended not with applause, but with the collapse of a life built on deceit. And though she thought she had escaped into the night, what awaited her outside would prove far harsher than anything in that dining hall. When she fled the restaurant that night, I thought I had seen the worst of it. But truth doesn't stop at exposure. It ripples outward, and those ripples always hit harder than anyone expects. The moment she walked into the night, she didn't just leave behind a ruined dinner. She left behind her entire foundation crumbling. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, cousins, co-workers who had been at the dinner messaged me everything from sympathy to anger. Some said they couldn't believe what they saw. Others admitted they had noticed strange vibes before, but never thought it could be this deep. I realized quickly that the story of last night was already spreading far beyond the restaurant. Her parents called me too, both of them broken. Her mother's voice trembled as she said she was ashamed, not of me, but of her daughter. She asked if I was all right, told me I had done the right thing, even thanked me for not hiding the truth. Her father was different, quieter, more contained, but his silence said more than words. He had always been proud of his daughter. Now, that pride had turned into a wound he didn't know how to cover. As for her, she stayed silent the first 2 days. No calls, no texts, nothing. Then, on the third day, her number appeared on my screen. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail instead. Her voice was shaking, desperate. She said she was sorry things turned out this way, that I had misunderstood everything, that we should talk in private. The words felt rehearsed, hollow, like someone who still believed they could spin their way out of ruin. I didn't reply. By the end of that week, consequences had started hammering down. Angela, the other man's girlfriend, hadn't kept quiet. She told her own friends what happened, and soon the man's workplace caught wind. He was a manager in a firm that valued its reputation, and word of him sneaking around with an engaged woman spread fast. His supervisors pulled him in for conduct concerns. Rumors swirled, his projects were stripped away, and though he wasn't fired outright, his career momentum took a nosedive. As for my fiancée, the social fallout was brutal. Her friends distanced themselves quickly. No one wants to be tainted by scandal. A cousin unfriended her online. Her maid of honor-to-be posted vague quotes about snakes always showing their skin. Even people who hadn't been at the dinner heard about it within days. She tried reaching out to defend herself, claiming she was trapped, manipulated, even targeted. But when faced with hard receipts, no one bought it. Her parents took the hardest stance. They cut her off financially. No more help with bills, no more quiet support. She had lived her whole life cushioned by their safety net. Now, that net was gone. For the first time, she was left to face the world without backup. I later learned she moved out of her apartment within 2 weeks. Couldn't pay rent. Ended up crashing at a friend's place. Then another. That too dried up. People don't offer couches for long when you've betrayed them. Eventually, she took a job at a small boutique downtown, far below her qualifications, just to keep afloat. Meanwhile, I returned to my life with a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Relief, because the trap had closed and I wasn't the one left inside it. Emptiness, because I had once planned a future with her, and that blueprint had burned in front of everyone. But I didn't collapse. Instead, I kept steady. Work, gym, family dinners. Stability became my shield. There was one meeting, though, that stayed etched in my mind. A week after the dinner, her mother asked to see me alone. We met at a quiet cafe, nothing fancy. She looked exhausted, as if she hadn't slept in days. When she spoke, her words were soft but sharp. She destroyed everything we believed about her, she said. But you, thank you for not hiding. If you had kept this to yourself, we would have gone on blindly, praising her, believing lies. You saved us from more shame down the road. I nodded, but didn't know how to reply. Gratitude felt misplaced. I hadn't done it to save them. I had done it to save myself. She reached across the table, touched my hand briefly, and added, I'm sorry you had to learn this the way you did. You didn't deserve it. That was the last real conversation I had with her family. After that, our contact dwindled. Not because of anger, but because my tie to them had been severed. Without their daughter binding us, we were simply people who once shared a dinner table. The following months were quiet, but not without shadows. Occasionally, I'd catch sight of her downtown, hair tied back, carrying shopping bags for customers at the boutique. She avoided eye contact, ducked away quickly. There was no confrontation, no apology. Just silence, heavy and unfinished. Angela, on the other hand, moved on fast. She sent me one final message a month later. He's out. I'm done with him. Good luck with your future. Short, decisive. She cut her ties cleanly, something I envied. As for the man, Victor, the one she had risked everything for, he faded. Word spread he had been transferred to a smaller branch of his company, away from the city, away from his old network. He and she didn't last. Not surprising. Affairs rarely survive when dragged into daylight. And me? I kept my distance. I didn't jump into new relationships, didn't rush into distractions. I let time settle the dust. Because what I had learned through this entire storm was simple. Betrayal exposes itself eventually, but you don't need to scream to prove it. You just need to shine a light and let the shadows crumble on their own. The night at the restaurant had been that light. The consequences were still echoing long after. The lost job, the broken ties, the empty apartment. She had gambled everything for secrecy, and once it cracked, she had nothing left. Months later, I finally listened to her last voicemail, one I had ignored for weeks. Her voice was tired, smaller than I remembered. I just wanted to say, I don't know how to fix any of this. I know you'll never forgive me. I wish I could go back. I wish I could undo it. But I can't. I ruined everything. I deleted it after listening once. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need it anymore. Some people spend their lives waiting for revenge, for a dramatic ending where the betrayer begs and the betrayed walks away. But life doesn't need theatrics. Life punishes through reality itself. And reality had already dealt her the harshest sentence. She lost everything that mattered, and there was no one left to blame but herself. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.